Welcome to the video, Guardians. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It's that time once again in Destiny 2 known as Weekly Reset, which is why in this video I'm going to do a quick review of all the featured Bright Dust items in the Eververse store, and I also will be reviewing 801's items this week as well. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So the first Bright Dust item featured on the main page of the Eververse store, we have a shader, and it's the Cloud Striding Couture shader. Now as you can see, this is actually a animated blue shader, and it's actually quite a nice looking blue shader. I like it. Then after that shader, we then have another shader, and it's the Aces Full of Kings shader. Now I think this is supposed to be a K6 inspired shader, so that's pretty cool, and this is what it looks like. Alright, so now after those shaders, we then have a ghost projection, and this ghost projection is called the spider projection. We then have 3 universal armor ornaments, and this week will be featured class items. And for hunters, we have the Intrepid Discovery Cloak, Titans this week have the Intrepid Exploit Mark, and lastly for my Warlocks this week, we have the Intrepid Inquiry Bond. And now, following those 3 universal armor ornaments, we then have the final item featured on the main page of the Eververse store, and it's an exotic emote called the Sparrow Getaway. Alright you guys, now we're going to move on to the second page of the Eververse Bright Dust store. So on the other featured Bright Dust page of the Eververse store, there's actually 3 rows, and these rows are the items row, the flare row, and lastly the consumables row. Now we're actually going to be starting from the top, so starting from the top, the first item that we have is an exotic emote called the Circling Sharks. Then after that we have an exotic emote called Rocket Stomp. An exotic ship called Assembly Stinger. An exotic vehicle called the Seafoam Glide. An exotic ghost shell called the Egregore shell. This is a very nice ghost shell. It has the same theme as the Presage exotic mission, and this is definitely a ghost shell that I recommend you pick up this week. After that, we then have an exotic weapon ornament for the exotic hand cannon Crimson called Iridescent Death. And the last featured Bright Dust item on the items row will be the Memory of Bruce projection. Alright, so moving on to the flare row, the first item we have is a transmat effect called Cannon Fodder. Next transmat effect we have is the Catch Flight Entrance transmat effect. Now after those transmat effects, we then have one more transmat effect called the Jade Coin effects, and this is the last transmat effect. Okay, so after all those transmat effects, we then have shaders, and the first shader we have is the Whispered Sheen shader. Next shader up is the Vibrant Medusa shader. Followed by the Bruised Blush shader. And lastly, the Lilac Bombast shader. So finally, on the last row, the consumables row, we have the concentrated matter gem consumable. This consumable will give you a chance to drop an upgrade module when you defeat bosses, and when you receive an upgrade module, the effect will last off. Then for the last consumable, we have the Glimmer Shard consumable. This consumable will give you some glimmer when you defeat bosses, and this is chance based, and this effect lasts for 4 hours. And there you go, Guardians. That's it for this section of this video. We're now going to look at 801's items this week. Alright, so at 801 over on the tower, the first set of items we will be looking at will be the armor items. And for hunters on the chest piece has 6 mobility, 6 resilience, 15 recovery, 6 discipline, 2 intellect, and 16 strength. Not a great roll. We then have 3 class items here, and all of these are useless because they provide no class stats. And then lastly on hunters, for the helmet, we have 14 mobility, 12 resilience, 2 recovery, 20 discipline, pretty nice, 2 intellect, and lastly 6 strength. This is a decent piece of armor for hunters. On the helmet, it has a pretty nice amount of discipline, a fair balance between mobility and resilience, and a total stat of 56, so not too bad. Now let's move on to the Titans. Now for the Titan class, on the chest we have 6 mobility, 8 resilience, 10 recovery, 19 discipline, 6 intellect, and 2 strength. Not a good roll. Then we have 3 class items which we'll be skipping. And then on the helmet we have 2 mobility, 6 resilience, 17 recovery, 2 discipline, 6 intellect, and 19 strength. This actually isn't too bad of a roll. It's pretty spiky in the recovery and the strength stat, so not too bad overall. Now we're going to move on to the final set of armor this week from 801, which will be the Warlocks. And last but not least, for the Warlock class, 801 has on the robes 7 mobility, 20 resilience, pretty nice, 2 recovery, 2 discipline, 2 intellect, and lastly a whopping 27 and the strength stat. This is an amazing piece of robes for Warlocks this week, and you should definitely pick it up. Now after this, we then have 3 class items, just like the Hunters and the Titans, so skip that. And lastly for Warlocks on the helmet, we have 16 mobility, 9 resilience, 2 recovery, 6 discipline, 10 intellect, and 8 strength. Not a great roll. Alright you guys, now we're going to move on to the last section of Ada's items this week, which will be her shaders and her materials. So for the shaders, the first shader we have is the Vitrified Chronology shader. The next shader up is the Bray Innovation shader. And the final shader available from 801 this week will be the War Cult Endgame shader. Lastly, for materials, 801 has upgrade modules. These are great for power leveling your character or just simply getting your weapons and your armor up to light. And there you go, guys. That's it for today's video. I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, drop a like on this video as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe if you want to see any more content, and thank you guys so much for watching.